生科小宇宙，以小细胞建大宇宙。Hi everyone, welcome to the BioCosmo portion of a panel discussion with Dr. Zhang and Dr. Qin Yan, held on June the 13th. It was a real privilege to hear their insights on the current academia landscape, from the effects of federal funding cuts and hiring freezes, to how long this period might last and how it compares with the 2008 crisis. We also talk about what junior researchers can do to secure a faculty position, and one audience question brought up a really practical topic: how to compare from institutions in the United States and China, and how to negotiate a staff package. In short, this conversation is full of thoughtful insights and practical advice. I also share some reflections at the end in a quick TLDR version, but I highly recommend listening to a full discussion. It's rich with useful ideas and really worth your time. So without further ado, here's our conversation. It's my great honor to introduce our two speakers today, Dr. Qin Yan Anthony Brady, Professor and Director of the Center of Epigenetics and Biomarkers in the Department of Pathology at Yale School of Medicine. He is a co-leader of the Genomics, Genetics, and Epigenetics Research Program and scientific co-director of the Center for Breast Cancer at Yale Cancer Center. He received his bachelor degree from the University of Science and Technology of China, PhD with Drs. Zhang and Ronald Conaway at the Oklahoma Medical Research Foundation and Stowers Institute for Medical Research, and postdoc training on cancer biology with Nobel laureate Dr. William Kaelin at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute and Harvard Medical School. He joined Yale as an assistant professor in 2008 and became a full professor in 2022. He has received many awards, including AAS Fellow, ASIP Outstanding Investigator Award, and Area of Hope Scholar Award from DoD Breast Cancer Research Program. Dr. Yan directs a research lab to elucidate the roles of epigenetic mechanisms that drive tumor initiation and progression, and to translate their findings into the clinic. He is also immediate past president of Asian Faculty Association at Yale and secretary at the Federation of Asian Professor Associations, which are two collaborators we have today. Dr. Yongli Zhang is a full professor in the Department of Cell Biology and Molecular Biophysics and Biochemistry at Yale University. He earned his bachelor degree in Applied Physics from Fudan University, a master degree in Theoretical Physics from the Institute of Theoretical Physics, Chinese Academy of Science, and a PhD in Biophysics from Yale in 2003. Following his doctorate, he completed a Jane Coffin Charles postdoctoral fellowship in Professor Carol Bustamante's lab at UC Berkeley. Dr. Zhang launched his independent research career at Albert Einstein College of Medicine in 2007 before returning to Yale in 2009. His research focused on elucidating the mechanism of critical molecular machines involved in chromatin remodeling, neurotransmission, organelle biogenesis, and mechanosensation, utilizing advanced techniques such as optical tweezers and single molecular approaches. Dr. Zhang's lab has made significant contributions to these fields. Beyond his scientific endeavors, he is a passionate advocate for AI education and research, contributing to Yale's graduate curriculum in this area. Dr. Zhang also serves as the past chair of the Membrane Fusion, Fission, and Traffic subgroup of the American Biophysical Society. He is the president of Asian Faculty Association at Yale. So welcome on board today. So two warm-up questions for Professors Yan and Zhang, and to get everyone on the same page. Could you please tell us the main funding source for your lab, including federal grants, private foundation, institute supports, or anything else? And what's the proportion of the soft money? Dr. Yan, yeah.
Okay, so I'll get started. So it's great to see all of you here. My laboratory normally has been funded by federal funding, foundation funding, industry funding, and institution funding. So just at different time is a little bit different, but right now I have about 40% from DoD, 30% from NIH, about 20% for industry, and 10% for institutional support. So which is a little bit different from most other people. I think most other people probably have mostly federal funding support. Yeah. I'll turn out to Yongli.
Yeah, first of all, I want to take this chance to thank Kershin for hosting this panel discussion and also for Yunpan and others organizing this panel discussion. And thank all the participants for joining us. Regarding the funding support, over the past 2 decades, my research group has been supported primarily by NIH. Yeah, nowadays, the particular is called MIRA grant, Maximize Investigator Research Award, so-called R35 from National Institute of General Medical Science. Yeah, this is the institute that primarily support basic science. And certainly there are many other institutes, yeah, for example, aging, cancer, etc.
I see. And could you tell us like the proportion of the soft money of your funding as well?
Yeah, when I started my lab, I got a startup. Yeah, but after that, my funding primarily come from NIH. Yeah, the so-called MIRA grant.
But touch upon on the soft money front. So in different places, institutions are a little bit different. If you are in the main campus, then you get 9 months salary. That's hard money support. You only need to support 25% of your salary. In the School of Medicine, it's a little bit different. So for another private institutions, so exploitation is somewhere between 70 to 80% for soft money support. In some other places, like the state universities, normally they get 50% of hard money support. So they only need to support 50% of the salary. So that's about what we this is general guideline, I would say.
I see. Awesome. So I'm wondering like what part of those fundings both Dr. Yan and Zhang mentioned in the last questions get affected in the past years and how that may or already affected the hiring and retaining of the people at all levels from undergrad to postdoc.
Because of the uncertainty of the funding support, so a lot of time we don't know when the grant will be reviewed and when the money will be coming. So a lot of times people take the more cautious approach. And I have to say, a lot of labs have stopped hiring, and my lab included, at least for the time being, until we see more stabilized funding situation. So that's the approach I'm taking. But some other people may have a different approach.
Yeah, I would add that the federal support nowadays is especially a challenge. On one hand, Trump administration has been always trying to reduce the NIH support, NSF support, but on the other hand, the Congress have been pushing back, to try to maintain or even slightly increase the main research budget. Yeah. So from my observation, in general, the funding support become more and more challenged. And a few very prominent, scientists in my field, I respect highly, have losing their funding. This is kind of unimaginable many years ago. But for myself, I was lucky that I renewed my grant 2 years ago before the funding card actually take the effect. So for myself, the funding cut had no major effect.
That's great. So we're really glad to see both professors keep your people at lab, although you're concerned about the future fundings. And I just want to ask, for example, for Dr. Yan's funding resource, 40% from DoD. Do you feel like that part also get reduced or only NIH and NSF funding get affected?
So the DoD funding last year has been cut. This is DoD CDMRP funding support. So they have a couple of research programs for different cancer research and maybe some other diseases as well. But this year, most of those has been restored. It's more similar to 2 years ago. One other thing I just want to mention is that even though we have a lot of uncertainty, but overall funding support has been robust because the overall funding has not really been changed. The only issue is the uncertainty and when it will be funded and how the grants will be viewed. So there's for us a lot of planning issue. It's not just the total funding. I mean, NSF has been cut, but the NSF compared to NIH is a much smaller agency in terms of the funding support. So that depends where you're getting your funding support. You maybe had to adjust your strategy to get into obtain different funding support.
I see. Yeah. So all those are good news. So have you considered resume hiring in the near future?
For me, No, I mentioned before.
Actually, I'm hiring. I'm hiring a postdoc, and even this week I meet one of the candidates because one of my postdoc will finish his research in my laboratory soon. He has been in my group for over 5 years, and now it's the time for him to publish his work to move on to search for a faculty position. Yeah, that's also related to our ongoing.
That's awesome. So for Dr. Zhang, since you are looking for a postdoc recently, do you feel this time it's easier for PIs to hire postdocs or the opposite, less postdocs in the market?
Yeah, certainly now is not a good time for search a postdoc. Once we have a position open, we used to have a lot of applicants from all over the world, especially from China. But nowadays, in the past year, I received no applicant directly from China. On the other hand, I receive a lot of applications from India and other countries. So, and the quality differ a lot. Yeah, the market has been shrinking. Primarily because of the geopolitical tension between China and the United States. And a lot of fresh PhD graduates, they prefer to stay in China instead of pursuing postdoc training in the United States, given the uncertainty in many aspects. For example, the visa application. Also, many policies that are not so friendly for foreigners, especially for Chinese.
That's a pity. And since both of you have more than 2 decades in academia, have you experienced similar funding or hiring crises before? If so, what are the similarities and difference compared with the current one?
Both of us actually have experienced the last cycle of a funding issue. I think last time it's from 2007 to 2009, the subprime mortgage bubble burst. Basically, I think the hiring for faculty position has been similarly like what happened last year. In 2009 is the worst time, and you hear a lot of cancellation of interviews and the hiring freeze, and that's what happened last year. It's kind of very similar to that. Yeah, so I think this time the slight difference is we don't know how long this will last, and but universities started hiring. It's not that we have stopped. For example, for Yale, we have a pause, and then we resume the hiring. So that's a good sign.
For my 2 decades of independent research, I would say probably now is the worst time in terms of funding situation, also research environment. But if we look back, even earlier days, there was a golden time for NIH support. For example, from 1998 to 2003, the NIH budget doubled. So that's the so-called golden NIH period. And the current situation probably starts from 2023, and the significant funding cut and also a lot of disturbance and turbulence occur in the higher education. So it's quite a challenge.
I see. And it's very interesting to learn the last crisis is about 2009. And I remember both of our two speakers actually getting the first assistant professor job around that time. So could you please share your experience during last crisis and how you secure your job from the very beginning?
So I think Lian and me are probably the lucky ones, and we secured a job before that happened. I started my position in 2009, and Yongli started his position in 2007. But we have seen how difficult it is for people to look for job in 2009 because we have friends who have been search for job and they have to get to the market a year later, so in 2010 to get on market. In our department, we actually still hire new faculty in 2009, but those positions are very competitive, and a lot of times some of the candidates actually had strong advocates from the mentors. Basically, the application pushes through to us, and there's a lot of networking that has been done, and for us to review those applications. And the qualification of the candidate are very strong at that time. In some way, for the institution, it's an opportunity for us to hire the best candidate. And if the institution is not conservative, and they will be able to get the best candidate during that time. And of course, in 2010, we kind of resumed, so it's like normal. Although that time, because we have 2 years of candidate, it's a competitive year as well.
I would say finding an academic job, especially independent PI position, is always a challenge. You have to demonstrate that you are worth investing for. When I was searching for a job, it was a bad time or a good time. I would say it's always a challenge to find an independent PI position. But I would say that probably now it's even more challenge. It's probably truly a challenge due to the funding cut. Not so many universities are hiring. As a result, there's probably more people competing for very limited faculty positions. But on the other hand, in the past year, my department was hiring, and I would happy to share my close observation of faculty position search or hiring.
Yes, please. We're just looking for that. Since you've served on the faculty search committee, could you please share the general profile of the final candidates that you have seen these days?
The Department of Cell Biology started searching for new faculty positions 1 year before. We received more than 300 applications, and the faculty search committee reading all the applications and identify the potential candidates. Then we interviewed around 10 candidates online. We invited 7 candidates on site, and eventually we made 3 offers, and 2 of which already accepted our offer, and 1 is pending. The 2 candidates who already accepted our offers are Chinese, and 1 from Rockefeller University, and the other from White Hat Institute affiliated with MIT.
I have served in multiple search committee actually since I started, starting from 2009. That's why I mentioned that it's quite competitive at the time. I would say it's equally competitive at that time. Right now, our department has done a lot of hiring actually since 2022. We had, I think, around 8 junior faculty through that process. I have served on all of those committees, including actually there's another one search that's ongoing right now. So the candidate usually they'll publish well, 1 or 2, normally sometimes 2 to 3 good publications. Not necessarily CNS people are chasing for, as long as it's solid science, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking for potential of the candidate. In addition, what we are looking for are potential ability to acquire funding support based on the chalk talk, and sometimes based on the track record of funding support. If they have fellowship or some grant support, that's always a plus. And I know a lot of people are concerned that you need to get a K99 or some similar grant to be competitive. It's helpful. It's not necessary. You don't need a K99 grant to find a position. I certainly did not, okay, at that time. And we have many faculties who do not have this kind of funding support, pay grant, and it's always helpful, but means that it's easy to put together the package because there already is some funding support. But what we are looking for is the potential. What I heard, though, from some of the state universities is that they are actually only interviewing candidates with some sort of funding support, which I think is not a smart move, and it doesn't have to be the one who has a funding support. Normally, it's an indication of success. Doesn't mean that's the best topic or best directions that they should be supporting.
Yeah.
Regarding the criteria for our selection, probably we look at your training record, where you did your undergraduate study, PhD study, postdoc training, and then your scientific productivity and how many papers you publish, where they publish, what kind of topics are, and also your research proposal. That's very important. And you will give a chalk talk to describe your research directions. And also we look at closely the recommendation letters. Based on all these parameters, the committee want to decide your potential and want to project your rate of success as an independent scientist.
That's very competitive this year, especially when we compare to the last crisis of 2009. So I just want to turn to ask about when the candidates get into the school, how different is the package these days compared to the old days or the days before the pandemic?
Well, I don't know exactly how much they're getting, but I think the package is competitive. Even compared to the old days, the package is bigger, right? Because you need more funding support. So basically, the start package will be enough for you to support part of your salary, or actually probably for salary for 3 years or so, something like that. And then 2 to 3 people, and plus research support, so that you get you started. So that's in general is a guideline. Some people who requires a lot of money for doing the research because of the mouse cost or some specific sequencing technology, they probably have a bigger package than the average candidate. But what I think the more important thing is for you to get enough money for you to get started. That's more important. You need to assess that based on your situation. It's not necessarily how much more money means a better package. Sometimes the research environment and the additional support, like for example, the core facility support and other support. Those you need to take into account and who you might be able to collaborate and whether this is a good fit, whether it's the right environment for you to be successful. Sometimes the smaller package probably is a better deal compared to some places that give you a lot of money if it's not a good fit. That's one thing, because of the funding support is not just your startup, right? So you are going to acquire your own funding support afterwards. So the startup package compared to what you are going to get is a small percentage. If you look at the long term, that's just the one part of it. It's a journey, and I think it's a process for you to get enough data for you to get bigger federal funding support or large foundation support.
I would say the startup package depends on the school and also on individual person. Typically in a bigger school, they can provide a larger startup package, and also depends on individual candidate. For example, if a candidate secure several potential positions or getting several offers, often the school may increase your package so that they can attract you to the school. I mean, the whole purpose of the starting package to allow you to assemble a research group, getting preliminary results, and eventually allow you to apply for an NIH grant or NSF grant so that you can become truly independent. From my observation for a year, new professor, the size can vary from 1 million to a few million US$.
That's very useful suggestions. And I think our next part is the most concerning part from our community. Do you have any suggestions for the people who are looking for faculty positions recently or in the next few years, especially the suggestions on the positioning, networking, or alternative paths?
As I mentioned, for job search, and it's important to find the right fit. Okay, so that's the first thing you want to keep in mind. You obviously want to send a lot of big applications, but you want to spend a lot of time to do your target search. And when you're writing the cover letter, you want to write it to the position that you are applying for, not just a blank one, which may not receive much attention. And you want to expand your networking, especially in those small meetings or through your collaborations. And those will be helpful for you to hear about job openings before it was proposed. Sometimes you could reach out and start applying. If you engage in those kind of interactions, you might have a better chance to be selected for first round interview. So I think getting the first interview is very important, and then you need to prepare well. So for your first interview and for your chalk talk, where you want to explain your research in a way that everybody will be able to understand, and you want to have an impression that you're intelligent when you are talking with the professors over there, to when you have the individual meetings, you want to do your research so that you know what kind of questions you will be asking during those interactions when you discuss certain area of science, and if they have a possibility of collaboration, that will increase the interest of the people who are talking to. All of those probably will be providing the feedback to the faculty research committee, and that will be taken into account when the decision is made. Of course, the important part, once you pass the first round interview, and then the second round is the chalk talk. Sometimes the chalk talk will happen at the same time as the first visit. So you give a chalk talk and explaining your future directions. Normally, they would like to see a path for funding support. They would like to see a long-term project as well, just to see where you'll be going, whether that might be a good fit for the position. And other times you can read all the different ads, and sometimes the advertisement is very broad, but what they're hiring may not be that broad. And if you have some institutional knowledge, or if you have some insider information, that will always be helpful, because that will tell you whether that's a good fit or not. Sometimes or may not.
My advice is, first of all, you know the job and know yourself. An independent PI position is certainly not suitable for everyone. This job is full of challenge and stress. If you want to pursue a relatively easier, peaceful, and less stressful job, academia independent PI position is probably not so suitable for you. And you need to certainly have the passion to face the challenge, to keep on searching in the dark and dealing with challenge and stressful. And this challenge coming from probably the productivity of your scientific research, from the funding support or funding application, and also many practical aspects of the group management or relationship with your colleagues. So you have to decide early on. And once you decide you have the passion and you really want to discover something, then the independent PI position is probably good for you. So in that case, I would strongly encourage you to take the chance to broaden your knowledge during your PhD study. It's a good time for you to learn everything. You can go to every talk you like or even you don't like. You just go and listen. And eventually your knowledge broadens. And as you learn more, you can connect all these seemingly discrete points and you start to understand some of the talks you went you previously didn't understand. And during your postdoc period, you probably need to decide the project, get the project done, and move on to search for a job. In the postdoc period, from my experience, I was very focused. I would focus on the project I'm working on. But when you begin your faculty position search, this is a good time for you to broaden your knowledge again. So you need to read broadly in the field, your own field, your laboring field, and even the science in general. And this is important because you will defend what you said during your interview, and you don't know what kind of question being asked. Actually, many questions is probably you never prepared. Another important thing for broadening your knowledge because during your job interview, as Qin said, you will meet many people with quite a different background. And if you know a little bit of their research, that will quickly allow you to engage in a very meaningful or productive conversation. Otherwise, if you have no idea about the research you are talking about, then it can be very awkward. And you need to engage a good conversation with anybody that you meet. Most important, you need to decide the research direction. This is probably the most time-consuming part. So you can either continue the research direction you already done with your postdoc or change a completely new direction. Either way is fine. Actually, in many labs, some PIs may not like you to bring your project away. In that case, you might compete with your PI. So you need to consider probability using the technology you learn and apply them to a completely different topics and quite different from what you are doing now. And also, you need to write a research proposal. In the proposal, you need to define your long-term goal and short-term goal. Long-term goal is probably for a decade long. In this decade, what do you want to do? And the short-term goal is probably a few years or in 5 years. The project should be feasible. And on the other hand, it should be very promising and potentially leading you to a brand new direction. Then you'll probably start to practice your talks. And this is extremely important for the candidates who come to my department. Most candidates can give very decent talk. And what can differentiate the candidates is the chalk talk. Chalk talk is where you define your future research direction and convince the candidates. During the chalk talk, people will ask you many different questions. To some degree, will challenge you. It may point to the direction you even don't know. So in this case, certainly you shouldn't be panicked and don't be angry at any faculty member who keep on asking you or challenge you. You're often the person most interested in you. If a PI is not interested in your question, they may not ask you question at all. So if you find somebody keep on asking questions, take that positively because they are very interested in your research. And this can be quite nervous. Keep on practicing is very important. Before you go out for a job interview, you need to practice a lot. You find your friends, listen to your talks. I remember when I was searching for a job many years ago, I even asked my wife to listen to my talk. My wife is actually not a scientist at all, but she still gave me good suggestions. For example, she asked me where to put my hand. Sometimes you even don't know where to put your hand. He suggested me put the hand back. I think it's a good way to do that. Anyway, it's very important to practice.
All right. Brilliant. Thanks so much for the comprehensive, insightful, and practical advice. We'll take to our final part that is about the immigration and F1 policy change. The Department of Homeland Security has finalized significant changes to limit the initial F1 duration to 4 years, require government renewal thereafter, and impose stricter rules on transfers and program changes, reduce the post-graduation grace period from 60 days to 30 days. So is there any discussion about those F1 policy change in your department, and how might that affect the recruitment of PhD students, both domestic and international, in the coming years?
So that's a tough question because this is something hard for even the university to handle. This is something we have discussed. What the university can do is to advocate for less restriction. Whether this will be changed down the road, it's hard to know. I think it's unlikely, at least for the short term. What makes it difficult is for international students. For domestic students, I would say at Yale, we mostly recruit domestic students. We have very limited slots for the international student, but that makes it even harder for us to recruit international students. Normally, the international students we got are the top candidates, very good, very strong candidates. We probably will get less applicants, and this is something we don't know. Our PhD application actually went down a little bit this year. Last year was a peak, even, and then we got a record number of students because other schools have rescinded their offer and they're not taking many students. So this year we actually decreased recruitment of the students because of too many students from last year. But I assume we'll be reviewing to the normal number of application. But for the F1 change, it's hard to assess at this point, but my gut feeling is that we'll have less international applicant, and that will decrease the competitiveness of the pool. So that's what I think. Yeah, Yongli, what do you think?
I would say that right now it's quite a challenge for international students, especially students from China. Over the past decade, I have been serving on the admission committee for many years. I could see a steady decrease of the applicant and also the admitted students directly from China. Especially in recent years, we admit less students directly from China. On the other hand, we see many Chinese students applying for our graduate program who already completed their undergraduate training in the United States. For those students who are already in the US in the PhD program, I would suggest that they take the good chance and take the privilege to work harder, and better not to go back to China before you get your PhD degree, because when you go back, often you have to apply your visa again, and you may have a re-examination when you enter this country. We met many cases last year. They went back to China for a vacation and they met big trouble when they tried to enter the country. Even one student in department, she was denied entry to this country, despite the fact that she was the fifth year. Unfortunately, our department allowed her to defend her thesis online. Eventually, she got her PhD degree. And for others, they were not so lucky, and they had to quit their PhD program and went to other countries. Unfortunately, this is a very, very sad story. Frankly speaking, we couldn't do much.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say that we should be that pessimistic, and because the students do travel and all of them do travel, they come back with no problem. It's just the rate of being checked is higher than before. When I was a student, I go back every 2 years and I never had any problem. I think that's still a freedom that they should be able to do. If you think too much about this, then that's a problem.
Those are very good suggestions. And I think I will stop here and open the floor for all the audience. If you have any questions, please take this chance to unmute yourself and ask questions. If not, I will read one question from the chat box. This is a very good one. Given the current policy landscape, what do you see as the respective advantages and disadvantages of pursuing a faculty position in China versus the United States? And what's the advice would you offer to someone have multiple offers? Well, I guess they have.
If you have a multiple offers, it's always a good problem to have. Okay, so my perspective about the positions in China and here. What my understanding is that in China, normally you can get a bigger startup package and you'll be able to recruit more people. But the competition is really high after you get a job. And I think the expectation is higher. You will be working harder probably than people who are here. That's one thing. But depending on what you want to do, right? So whether you like the environment over there versus the environment here. For the people here, I think the competition is also higher in terms to secure a job, and at the same time there are some other uncertainty about the funding. But if you think an institution where you get a job is the right fit, that probably is less a problem if you go to a different place where you do not have the resources or not the optimal resources. Some of the positions in China, like Westlake and some others, are so great, and I think it's hard to resist. If given the chance, probably will be taking that offer, right? So that's because of the not only how much money you're getting, but the research environment is so good. If you have multiple positions to select, what I always think is whether this is the best fit is not how much money at the end. If that's the right place for your scientific environment, that's the right place. It doesn't have to be the one with least money, but you can always negotiate for more money. Once you get your offer, the first thing you do, if you have multiple offer, is to think about where you want to go and negotiate. I think for Chinese and a lot of times people do not think that much. And for my other colleagues, and the first thing they see is this is least I get, and this is what I need to get. As long as you put a reasonable offer, a reasonable request, so that you can be successful. And I think the department always has room. They always do. The initial offer is not the best offer, so do negotiate, and you will get a better offer.
For my advice, depend on the individual. For some people, I might suggest to look more in China. For the others, I may suggest them to look more in the US or in Europe. And one point that should keep in mind is that scientific research over the past decade in China has been advanced very quickly. And the criteria for independent position is almost as high as those in the US. You probably don't expect that it will be easier to find a job in China than in the US. Actually, in some universities in China, they even have a higher criteria. Over the past decade, I also reviewed many tenure promotion packages from China, and the standards are truly high, especially for some famous universities in China. So it depends on individual. If you think you like being in the US, it's fine. Then you can focus on the US. But in any case, I would suggest you apply on both sides. Then you decide where to go.
And I think another questions pop up in the chat. Which strategy would you recommend when searching for a faculty position? Applying broadly to many positions or taking a more targeted approach? This one from our audience.
We would take a more targeted approach, and although you still need to apply to a lot of universities, but a more targeted approach would be more effective because there's only how much you can do with your time to write very different application package if you are applying. Actually, my daughter just went through the applying for colleges. It's kind of similar. You only have the limited ability to do a certain number of places. So a more targeted approach would be more effective. That's my suggestion.
I would suggest you depend on your time to apply as many as you can, but don't just write the same cover letter and send the same package to everywhere. That's not good. So you have to customize and tailor your application to each school. So it can be time consuming and people can see the difference. Also, frame your research slightly depends on the school you are applying. Even for schools that you think there's probably no similar research, as long as it's in the advertisement, it says broader search, for example, then it's fine. You can apply. Many schools, they are searching for complementary expertise. That's often a desired thing. And for others, they may have a very specific area to search and they want to strengthen that area. In that case, you probably should pay attention. If your research area is different, then it's better not to apply. So you have to check carefully.
One thing I just want to add, because of the recent funding, the policy changes, and it's possible that more funding will be sent to the state and not of the coast side in the middle of the country. So there might be more opportunities in the middle of the country.
Thank you so much for all those advice.
There's a question on AI in the chat.
I guess for Dr. Zhang, since you mentioned you are advocate for AI, does AI significantly change the game of publishing, writing proposals and research? How do you think postdocs and junior PIs should do to adapt to those changes?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I would encourage everybody try to embrace AI in your research. This is many aspects, including development of a research proposal. For example, you can make a draft and then ask the AI to review your proposal and make a suggestion and revise the text. And you can go many rounds. And nowadays, you can even ask AI to write a research proposal on a specific topic. Of course, the human now can do better. You can just ask AI to write a proposal without any modification. Most likely, you will end up a very poor proposal. Yeah. So, and also they can make mistakes. And this is kind of business. If you make a single mistake, a very obvious mistake, it will ruin your application.
So our very last question for Dr. Yan, what strategies or advice would you recommend as we prepare for negotiation, as you mentioned that many times?
For the negotiation, you want to have a package that makes you be successful. So that's always reasonable if you request based on the guideline what is needed for you to be successful. So what kind of equipment you need, what the reagent, and how many people you want to hire to make the project move forward. And that's the negotiating strategies. Of course, if you have multiple offers, then you can always use the other offers as the guideline to push the places that you most likely want to go. But you don't want to negotiate many times, and you do not want to burn the bridge. If the negotiation is too aggressive, they may not view you, and you decided not to go later on. So that might be a problem down the road once you have interaction with the other institution, because they will see you just trying to take advantage of them. So that would be my suggestion.
That was a lot of great suggestions and insights. I personally love this conversation, not only because both speakers were so generous with their thoughts, but also because they share so many genuine insider perspectives with us. So here are my 3 takeaways. First, the academic job market for faculty position may be recovering compared with the past 2 years, especially the last year, which was extremely competitive and had very limited openings. But the market is still far from normal, and it may not return to pre-pandemic conditions anytime soon, since many talented candidates from the past few years are still on the market. Interestingly, last year's job market felt quite similar to the post-2008 recession. That said, the market for postdocs, research assistants, and technicians may take longer to recover, mainly because of funding uncertainties. Individual PIs are being very careful about every dollar they spend, and delays in grant review, funding, and disbursement over the past 2 years have only added to the backlog. We still don't know how long it will take to back to the normal. Second, for new graduates or postdocs looking for faculty positions, the preparation is still very similar to before the pandemic, because there's not much we can do about timing. A strong research proposal tailored to a target score, a solid chalk talk, networking, and careful preparation for the on-campus visit are all essential, along with a strong publication record and a clear career trajectory. At the policy level, more opportunities may emerge in the Midwest compared with the East and West Coast, since a funding support may be tilting in that direction. As Dr. Zhang put it, job hunting is all about knowing the position and knowing yourself. That's an incredibly insightful and even philosophical way to think about the process. And as Dr. Yan reminded us, your time and energy are limited. So it's important to apply strategically to as many schools as you reasonably can within your bandwidth. Third, once you receive offers, comparing and negotiating them becomes an art. As Dr. Yan said, the initial offer is never the best offer. There's always room for negotiation. It's best to first decide where you truly want to go based on the academia and scientific environment, and then negotiation from there, whether or not you have a competing offer. That way, you still have to avoid going back and forth too many times. And in some cases, start packages from certain institutes in China are simply too large to compete with. At the same time, we were reminded that the competitiveness of Chinese universities, especially the elite ones, is really high, and their tenure requirements can be extremely demanding, which is something to keep in mind. This is the first podcast episode from BioCosmo focused on academia job hunting. Please let us know what you liked, what you don't, and what you'd like to hear more of. We'd really love your feedback as we continue improving future episodes with your support. Please subscribe if you enjoyed the episode and stay tuned for our next conversation.